Well, folks, we're back with another custom card video. Yeah, I actually turned this one around pretty fast since our last one. And this time around, all of you designed some start of game effects for Hearthstone. Always a bit of a controversial topic. It's hard to make good start of game effects, but I think everybody did a great job. We got some cool ones to talk through in this video. Starting off here with Avriel the Anti-Mage, a bit of a Dota inspiration here from Kryptonic, it looks like. This is a 5-mana 5/5. Start of game, if your deck contains no spells, your hero becomes immune to spell damage for the rest of the game. So this is the literal anti-mage card, perfect for countering Quest Mage. Right now, one of the best ways to beat Quest Mage is just not play minions into their spells if your deck can afford to do that. And this would actually kind of take it the opposite way. Just play all the minions. Just play all minions and weapons. And then you're going to be able to negate the reward for the Quest Mage, meaning they'll have to be more honest with their spells, which, frankly, they could still kill you in many ways. They have tons of burst damage in that deck, but this might give you a slightly better chance. In those first couple turns, they really swing things or burst you down post-quest because spell damage isn't going to matter. And more generally, it's not just Quest Mage. There are other spell damage relevancies that are in Hearthstone now and certainly could be in the future as well. So if you're willing to commit to this game plan, this is a cool way to shut down all that bonus damage from spell damage, which is really cool. I think this is a great kind of tech card, and I like that it works right from the beginning, but it has, pretty harsh deck building restriction. Even minion-based aggro decks often want to run a handful of spells for various reasons, buffs and card draws and those sorts of things, but this is a tight enough restriction, I think, to make this card feel fair, but still relevant. Moving on here to Anna, the Banhamma Slamma. And I really just picked this one because of the name. It's brilliant here from Andrew Jackson. She's a 3-mana 4/2 for Hunter, and her start of game reads, if your starting deck contains exactly one beast, feed it bananas equal to its mana cost. And at first I was like, no, you can't do this. This is like insane with Wolpertinger. It's going to make your Wolpertinger so big. And then I realized, oh, no, wait, actually, that's a pretty brilliant condition here that it's based on mana cost. So you can't do anything crazy like with a Wolpertinger because it's just one mana, right? It's just going to get one banana. And certainly a 2/2 Wolpertinger is good, but it's not totally crazy. And then you go the opposite direction, right? Like, oh my God, King Crush. I can make a gigantic King Crush, giving him 9 bananas, basically, making him a 17/17. But then you've got this 9-mana card that's maybe a little bit harder to play. So it kind of self-balances itself. Now, I didn't go through the whole set and see if there's anything like crazy broken in this. I feel like there's probably some mid-game minions that feel a little too good. Things like maybe Augmented Porcupine is going to get 3/3 in stats, which makes him pretty big and nasty already. But that one's probably on the threshold of feeling sort of okay, just because this is a restriction where you're only getting that one beast, and you're going to fill out the deck a lot beyond that, which can be tough to do. So I don't know, what do you guys think? Is this one too powerful because of cards like Porcupine? Are there other examples that are even more egregious than the Porcupine? Or does this have enough checks in place essentially to keep this card feeling a little bit more fair? Curious to hear those thoughts. Moving on to Midas Mirror from Rhythms. This is a card that takes mirror matches to a whole new level. It's a 3-mana 3/3. Start of the game, draw this, and battle cry, replace your hand and deck with a copy of your opponent's. So a little bit of a brilliant subtlety. Oh, this is a dual class card as well for Mage and Priest, by the way. I think a really brilliant design here, because at first glance you would say, wait, why doesn't this just replace hand and deck with your opponents right at the start of game? What's this like extra draw this aspect of the card? That seems unnecessary. But I actually think that's why this card is so well executed, because it makes it, number one, not as frustrating to play against, because for instance, like your opponent will not get your quest if you're playing into a Midas Mirror. So it limits the application a little bit, which is important for any sort of card like this. Otherwise, it'd be really frustrating to have an exact mirror match like all the time because people are running Midas Mirror. On top of that, for the person playing Midas Mirror, it gives you some agency over whether or not you want to play this. So you might just say, no, this is not a game where I need to Midas Mirror because this is like a favorable matchup for me. Whereas alternatively, if you're entering into an unfavorable matchup, maybe you can Midas Mirror to try to save that matchup. Now, there is some downside to this. Like, it's basically giving you a 29 card deck because you're always drawing this at the beginning. So most decks would run this even if they never played it, right? They could just run this and have a tighter deck list essentially, and then save this maybe for some emergency outs and stuff later. So there are some potential power level concerns with that aspect. So, maybe there's some space to still improve this a little bit or fix some of those gaps, but I think this is a really clever idea. Of course, a great mirror match pun played out here. Great art, fantasy. This card delivers in a bunch of different places for me, so I think it's actually pretty sweet. Next up here's BRB from That Means No. The cleverness is really here this time around. This would be a 1-mana 2/1 beast for Druid, and start a game, skip your first 2 turns, and then you gain an extra mana crystal at the start of your turns. So this is essentially AFK, the hero in Battlegrounds, but adapted to standard format. Even the name is adapted here with BRB instead of AFK, which brilliant across the board. Again, even found some artwork that somehow seems to fit rather well. And this is cool, right? This is basically, I'm going to pass my first couple turns, but I'm going to be a super ramp deck built in from the beginning. Now, I'll be honest, I think this is too strong. We've already got instances in many metas in the past where Druid was happily skipping their first couple turns anyway, just didn't have anything to do, and then ramping up successfully. So there's a big concern here that just baking that in already means you don't even have to try to account for those early turns. You're not really sacrificing much anyway, and you have additional ramp perhaps on top of that could really push you super fast. So I don't know if there's some way to slow this down. Maybe you just gain 1 extra mana crystal off this or something that keeps it in check a little bit more. But man, another card that is just a home run in every other creative aspect of design. So I got to give this one some credit, even if it scares me a little. Moving on here to Alonsus Fail from Essern Femoral. This is a 5-mana 5/6 for Paladin. Start a game. If your deck contains no neutral cards, add 3 Silverhand Recruits to your hand. So some additional pure Paladin synergy here, something we still have a little bit of in standard format with Urel, but we lost a little, and I think this would be a cool way to bring it back, because this actually encourages a couple different things, both pure Paladin and Quest Paladin for Silverhand Recruit synergy, kind of in 2 ways. Number one, this adds some 1-mana cards to your hand that can help you complete your quest, or if you have enough of that working anyway, this could add some 1-mana cards to your hand that you just save up until your quest is done to be able to play some bigger minions off of the Cariel and any other buffs you might include in your deck. So it's sort of the perfect synergistic card for 2 different angles of Paladin, and fusing those together would be pretty sweet. Now, it is a little more challenging to build perhaps a Quest Paladin without access to neutral 1-drops. We've seen things like Pinflinger, for instance, find some success in those sorts of decks. But that's okay. That's the whole point of pure Paladin, right? Is putting checks in place, and Paladin still has a lot of stuff to work with various secret packages. So is a strong enough upside to make it worth the downside? Debatable, but knowing that you always have a great curve and some easy activations for your quest, I think is enough reward to make it feel worth it. So pretty neat start a game effect here that feels very balanced as far as I'm concerned. Next up here is Kel'Thuzad Frozen Wastes from Eric the Red. An 8-mana 6/8 for Mage. Start a game. If all spells in your deck are frost spells, your hero power freezes its targets this game. So pretty darn powerful hero power effect here as far as I'm concerned. Maybe just too good, frankly. Like, this card might just be too strong, because freezing out minions that affordably and at no resource cost to you is sort of nuts. And then freezing out face sometimes against some decks can totally lock them down, just having that guaranteed face freeze every single turn. And, there is a downside here that you only have frost spells. That's a tight restriction on deck building. Frost spells in particular can be some of the more awkward ones, or sort of singular in focus. They're more about stalling than doing anything else in standard format, at least at the moment. So, maybe that's enough of a deck restriction, deck building requirement here to keep this feeling fair. It still makes me nervous, and it seems a little unhealthy, but yet again, I have to admit, like, this is a home run as far as delivering on flavor is concerned. The way it synergizes all together with the character, frost spells, enabling a freeze effect on a hero power, that all feels fantastic to me. So if it's not OP, this card is like really, really well done and well executed. 8-mana minions also pretty punishing to play. So it's a dead draw in many cases, like we saw with Baku back in the day. So this one's close. Do you guys think this would be too OP? Or does it look like a realistic card that might just exist in Hearthstone these days? Because we have a lot of really strong cards in Hearthstone. I could probably be argued either way. I'd have to take a really close look at the frost spells, though, to see if this seemed like it would just be too annoying to deal with, because that's probably my biggest fear here. Moving on to Rune Carver Master Smith from NTG, and this is all about a crazy Lich King setup card, and there's a lot I like about this one, but I want to talk about the elephant in the room. This is a common card, which I feel like this should totally be a legendary card. Just call it like the Rune Carver or something, right? So it feels more legendary. Because the way this works is it shuffles a Helm of Domination and Frostmourne into your deck at the start of game. And those are two different pieces that you collect. And Helm of Domination summons you 3/3 undead, and Frostmourne destroys a random minion when equipped. And it's a 5/3. After you've played both of those, you turn into Lich King, which is a hero who just has lifesteal by default, and a hero power that summons 2 3/3s. So that lifesteal in particular is pretty crazy. If you have Frostmourne still equipped, for instance, some big heals and a nice grindy hero power over time as well. Now, that's cool. Like, I love the idea of this, right? Like, collecting the two things that make the Lich King, having to play them both. It's kind of like a Cthulhu-style collectible card, only 2 pieces. That's great. I love it. It does make me nervous, though, how you could run 2 Rune Carvers. So you could have 2 Helm of Dominations and 2 Frostmournes in your deck. So not only is that weird from, like, a flavor standpoint, like, why do I have 2 Frostmournes? That's strange for, a one-of weapon. Although, of course, Doomhammers and Gorehowls and such have done that in the past as well. Still feels weird to me. But also just could increase the consistency of hitting either of these cards. And, they're reasonably powerful cards, not crazy on their own, but also just increases the consistency because you have twice as many in your deck. Now, that does mean you could hit 2 Helm of Dominations in a row, and that doesn't make you the Lich King. So it kind of self-balances itself, but it still increases the overall proportion of cards in your deck. So for me, I would just make this guy legendary. I think that solves these problems, and this card's really, really cool and delivers on some awesome Lich King fantasy of actually becoming the Lich King yourself. I think that's really, really cool. So that's the one tweak I would probably make here. And if that's done, I think this card's really rather nifty. And we need some more Lich King action in Hearthstone Standard as far as I'm concerned. Moving on here to Lilith Blade Curse from Crim. And this is a nice little tight card, elegant card. It's an effect I've seen suggested many, many times before, but this one does it just as well or better than any with a great character. Start a game. For the rest of the game, your hero power can trigger combo cards. I think that's awesome. We've had so many instances in Hearthstone, and I have playing Rogue, where it's like, oh, God, if this hero power could activate combo, I'd be in such a good spot, but instead I can't hero power. I have to squeeze in some other, like a second combo card that's not going to be activated. There's just all these little unfolding downsides. So this would solve one of those classic Rogue problems and open up some different turns and maybe some weapon style synergies for hero power. All sorts of little things. So a simple, familiar design, but still a very welcome one. Next up is Dr. Fizzle Crank from Magic Milk. 5 mana, 3/5 for Warrior. Start of game. If the total mana of cards in your deck is more than 100, shuffle 3 bombs into each deck. And I love this condition, playing on the total cost of your deck. Now, I'll be frank, I didn't look up any like average costs for decks. I'm sort of trusting that 100 is enough to make it feel like a control deck. It certainly seems like it should be, because if your deck was all 3 mana cards, right, you'd only get to 90 mana. So you have to get some pretty expensive stuff, especially if you have a reasonable curve where you've got a few, early game cards. You're going to need some heavy hitters in there to get to 100 mana. And if you do, you get this reward where you put some bombs in your deck. So you got to put big late game bomb cards in your deck to get bombs into both players' decks. Now, I actually think it's interesting that this is symmetrical. I think if this requirement is there, and it's a fairly challenging requirement to achieve, I think it at least enforces an archetype, a more slow style of play. I think it'd probably be okay if they just went into your opponent's deck. I think it's reasonable to put them in both. That feels like a check on the power level. And if you have a way to gain extra life so the bombs are less impactful to you, or if you expect your opponent to draw way more cards than you, it can still be a net advantage for you if you build your deck in a way that makes the bombs more risky for your opponent than yourself. So that's okay, but I think you could almost get away with just making it one directional as well, and it wouldn't feel totally crazy OP. But nonetheless, really fun way to put another condition in Hearthstone that we haven't really seen before that's cost-based. I like the way that encourages slower styles of play, so this would be a really fun card for me. And then finally here, our last card is Trade Master Gallywix from War Mage. And this one's a 3-mana 2/4, start a game. If this is your only legendary, then you draw a card. So basically, this is a pretty useless legendary other than its start a game effect. So if your deck doesn't have any legendaries of value, of merit, that do things, like you can't even run a Man Crick, for instance, which might be a great aggro card, then you can get a bonus card at the start of the game. And, you know, to some extent, that feels really powerful. Just getting a free draw at the start of the game is nuts. And there are probably some decks out there that can get away without running legendaries. I mean, most of them have at least one or two, but they're not necessarily the most important things. And you might just be able to build kind of a Zooey tempo deck or something that's still competitive. And then you got this little bonus on this legendary card. But I had a second thought about this one. It's kind of, in a way, like a budget balancing card, which I thought was cool. So essentially, if you're a free-to-play player who doesn't have access to a ton of legendaries, this might be a legendary that you could craft that gives you a distinct advantage while still playing a budget deck. And, you know, any legendary can be good. Like getting a Man Crick in your deck or whatever is great. That's maybe not a great example because I think he was free, but whatever. Crafting one key big legendary that makes your deck better feels similar in some ways, but this is one you could use across every deck and still sort of play on a budget and realize this upside without having to, you know, craft a bunch of cards or deck-specific legendaries. So I don't know if this is a big enough reward or if it has other problems, but in theory, I like the idea of this as a way to make people on a budget feel like they have one card that's just really good in all their decks, and it's like a great starter card, and maybe, you know, it kind of becomes useless after a while once you start getting more, but just something to get you over the hump and get you started is a fun idea in theory. Not sure this is the perfect execution, but it's totally a fine character for it, and it feels like a great idea and a great start for me. So I definitely wanted to spotlight this as a kind of point of discussion, if nothing else. All right, folks, there you have it. Those are the custom start of game cards this time around. Some really cool designs here. Always curious to hear your thoughts on these. What do you like? What would you maybe tweak a little bit to your liking? Always happy to see some great discussion in the comments down below. As for next time around, I want everybody to design a legendary weapon. What is a weapon in Hearthstone you'd like to see? Does something cool and awesome to merit being a legendary weapon. And particularly for, you know, non-weapon classes, traditionally, that's always an exciting thing to see. So check the description to submit your legendary weapon designs down below. Thanks as always much for watching, and until next time, game on.